I'm just waiting for the signal from the technical guys. Yes, and we are live. Happy Nordic Days, everybody, and or Happy Nordic Day, and welcome to Nordens Hus, the Nordic House here in Copenhagen, and welcome also all of you that follow us online. My name is André Jamholt, and I'm a senior advisor here at the Nordic Corporation, or Nordic House here in Copenhagen, and I will be your host for this event today. We have 45 minutes with interesting news, interesting discussions. But first of all, some practicalities, because we also are broadcasting live. There are a limited amount of time, so we need to kind of be short and to the point in our answers, questions or comments. That also goes to the audience, which I hope we can let in with some questions afterwards. And to start it off, in this troubled time, I think it's only appropriate to point out the significance of the 23rd of March. Today we celebrate Helsingforsavtalen, or the Helsinki Treaty. On this day, 60 years ago to this day, wise Nordic parliamentarians got together and created the platform that the Nordic cooperation is built on. It is our constitution. So once again, happy Nordic Day, everybody. And as you all know, today we also launch the new edition of State of the Nordic Region. And this event will take a closer look at the post-pandemic labor markets. We will discuss what the labor market will look like in the future. And we will get new insights into the scale of unemployment and short-term layoffs due to the pandemic. And to open this event today, we are here in the Nordic House, so it's only appropriate that I give the word to our Secretary General, Ms. Paula Lehtomäki.
Distinguished Minister, dear friends, first of all, warmly welcome to Nordens Hus to celebrate the Nordic cooperation. 60 years from Helsinki Agreement, it is a very important big day for us all. As we all know, war and peace were central elements behind the Nordic cooperation. One of the purposes was to tighten cooperation to safeguard the peace we had achieved. Nobody would have guessed nor wanted that war and peace would be so central again today. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has shaken us all and reminded us of issues that we have not been confronted with in our everyday life for many years. These are, for example, the fundamental values that the Nordic cooperation is based on: democracy, rule of law, civil rights, freedom of speech. We now see that these cannot be taken for granted, but they need to be continuously defended and nurtured. And so does Nordic cooperation. On days like today, where we celebrate our special cooperation, we must remember how important it is to have this family that we can count on. A family that is not only a nest of peace and stability, but a region which is to become the most sustainable and integrated in the world. Dear friends, sustainability and integration is the very heart of the Nordic vision and a focus of the everyday work here in the Nordic Council of Ministers. Today we are at the core of these important issues, as we are proud to release the report State of the Nordic Regions 2022. This biannual report is an excellent and unique piece of work from Nordic Region, the Nordic Research Centre for Regional Development and Planning. Naturally, this year's report has focused on COVID-19 and its effect on the Nordic region. The theme for today's debate is COVID-19 and the Nordic labour market. What does a post-pandemic labour market look like? We know that a crisis can be an opportunity for new patterns and trends. The increase of working from home is a new pattern from the pandemic. And this year's State of the Nordic Region has new data on how the Nordics related to working from home. Another new form is platform work. Before the pandemic, platform work was a new but limited phenomenon. But as the lockdown led to fewer jobs in the service sector and more people looking for online services, platform work grew bigger in the Nordic countries. Nordic region was in many ways hit by the pandemic, but we saw a rapid recovery as well. In this recovery, the so-called Nordic model with broad public sector and tripartite dialogue in the labour market certainly played an important role. I am delighted that our social partners are attending our discussions even today. One of the main tasks of the Nordic Council of Ministers and our institutions is to act as a catalyst for the Nordic countries to share knowledge, experiences, and come up with new solutions. We are putting a lot of effort in raising knowledge of developments in the labour markets. One example is Nordforsk, which has just recently decided to fund a research program for the next 5 years called Future Working Life. This program will constitute a significant knowledge base for this field in the coming years. Dear friends, Nordic countries are in many ways some of the most successful countries in the world. It is not a coincidence. It is a result of hard, decisive, and determined work where democratic values have been respected. It has created societies where trust is a key element in our relations to each other and the authorities. To develop our societies and the cooperation further, and in particularly to make the Nordic region the most sustainable and integrated region in the world, determined long-term work is again needed. I wish you all interesting discussions today, inspiration and enthusiasm to our common work towards integrated and sustainable Norden. Welcome.
Thank you, Paula. And now let's get down to business. To give us an insight into what we have learned during the pandemic and what the future might hold for us. Let me welcome to the stage Dr. Carlos Tapia, Senior Research Fellow at Norregio. The stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. I'm really happy to have this opportunity to speak in such an important day in the Nordic region. And also I'm very proud of having the chance to introduce our flagship report in this venue. This report, which focuses on the impacts of the COVID pandemic on labor markets in the Nordic, among other relevant themes, is one of the many reports that have been published over history already since the 70s. So in a way, considering the events that are shocking us in the last weeks, the pandemic might also look like something of the past, but it's not. And it's good to look at the impact of this pandemic on various dimensions of well-being on the Nordic region. And that is exactly what our report has done. And that is what I will do today, try to produce a teaser on the labor market impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic in the Nordic region. So I would start with a quote by the International Labour Organization that claimed that the pandemic had a deep, far-reaching, and unprecedented impact on labor markets. And that also holds to some extent for the Nordic region. However, unlike previous economic crises, the COVID pandemics had a more selective impact on specific sectors and barely affected others. In general, those sectors where close social interaction and mobility was necessary for actual functioning of these economies, the impact was larger. In particular, accommodation and food services, transport and recreation, arts and culture were heavily impacted. That also has a reflection on territorial levels, because the economies that rely the most on these sectors, in particular Åland and Iceland, were more severely impacted than the economies that are more diversified in other countries. Among those larger economies, the country was mostly affected in terms of registered unemployment was Sweden, where there was an increase of 3.5 percentage points in unemployment rate. Denmark and Norway were less affected, around 1 percentage point increase, and Finland was about 2 percentage points. However, all these impacts were higher and more severe on vulnerable groups, including young people, people with low levels of qualification, immigrants, and those in general that were involved in typical sectors or activities. So not those covered by indefinite full-time employment schemes. Luckily enough, the broad and breadth temporary layoff schemes, furlough schemes that were applied and designed in most countries helped to alleviate social impacts. At some point in the pandemic, it was estimated that around 10% of the working population was added or included in one of these furlough schemes. But as you can see on the map, there were municipalities where this number was way larger. So all these changes led to mobility changes that had a repercussion on everyone's life. At some point, in the most critical months of the pandemic, 70% of the labor population in the Nordics was under some sort of mobility restriction policy. 90% if we also consider recommendations. So based on Google mobile data that we processed for this report, we found that there was a decrease in mobility of around 23% in the Nordics. And that had also a very relevant impact on cross-border commuting, not only in the Öresund case, which is what is shown on the bar chart on the screen, but also in other cross-border regions like Svinesund between Sweden and Norway, and Tornedalen between Sweden and Finland. There was a deep decrease on cross-border commuting due to both formal and also informal impediments for the mobility of workers. So the numbers of documents required, the lack of information, and the differences between the test regimes on both sides of the border created additional hurdles to workers to go for their work positions. However, these restrictions accelerated pre-existing trends towards more working from home scheme. That was a trend that was already visible in the Nordic region already since the early 2000s, as you can see on the line chart. And already before the pandemic, more than 30% of the population was working on work from home at least part of the time. But the pandemic accelerated this trend between 5 and 10 percentage points depending on the country. Norway is a bit of an outlier here, but the reason for that is mostly related to the way data is collected by European Labour Force Survey, which is the data shown on this chart. However, even at the most critical moments in the pandemic, more than half of the population had to attend their workplaces. So the work from home trend is essentially linked or driven by sector and occupation motivations. There are some sectors that are more likely to be allowing workers to work from home. For example, IT, public administration, finance, arts and education. But other sectors are more difficult to find ways or to allow workers to work from home, including tourism, industrial manufacturing, agriculture, and other sectors. And the same holds for occupations. There are some occupations, in particular high level occupations in the management or high skill personnel that can be more easily done from home, and there's some occupations where this is not possible. So based on these patterns, we created this typology of municipalities in terms of work from home potentials, where we tried to capture this idea of how many, which share of the total jobs in each municipality could actually be done from home. And we found that around 37% of the total jobs in the Nordic region, that is 9.5 million jobs, could be done from home potentially. But that concentrates again in the cities. This is very important from a territorial perspective, because some of the most rural areas were expecting to be boosting or hindering their own local economies using these work from home patterns that were being discovered during the pandemic. In particular, this multi-locality idea, people working from their second homes for their city works. However, this needs to be enabled by proper digital facilities. In particular, we should be able to close the digital gap even further, which is something that we have already started, but we are not yet there. Denmark is a good example of how that can be done. In the country, already more than 90% of the municipalities provide super fast broadband connection to 85% of the households, but that percentage is still below 50% in some countries like Finland. And let me finalize the presentation by saying a few words about the whole report. I just gave a teaser in a very short, condensed time about the labor market section, but there's other three big themes covered in the report, which are demography and economy. And we include lots of maps, visuals, plots, data, sources, background information that could be very useful to support this debate about the long-term impacts of COVID-19 on the Nordic region. So thanks again, and hope that I will be able to answer some questions later.
And thank you, Dr. Tapio. Now, let's start the discussion. Here to help me do that, I have the Danish Minister for Cooperation, Flemming Møller Mortensen. Welcome to the stage.
Thank you.
Then we have Christine Ramlund, Chair at the Danish Youth Council. Peter Halskjær, Labour Market Manager at the Danish Chamber of Commerce. And last but not least, Magnus Gisler, General Secretary for the Council of Nordic Trade Unions. Welcome, everybody. And I would like to start with you, Minister Mortensen. What reflections do you have after hearing this presentation? I mean, we do hear that we have done very much right under this pandemic, but not everything was right.
No, but a lot was right. But today I think it's most right to say congratulations to all of us. It's really a nice day, and it's spring outside, and I know that coming to this nice house, going to the cellar, it's almost being in winter time, but it is springtime outside. But also in our minds, I have to start to say it's winter time. It's really dark autumn in my mind, because what is crucial to all of us is naturally the situation here in Europe. And I'm very pleased to see how united Europe are and the Nordic countries are just now, because this is a matter of values and rights to people, sovereignty to countries, and I'm so pleased that also among the Nordic countries we have been that much united to say what is needed to do against Russia and Belarus, and I'm very pleased to that. And I simply hope that we will be strong together, and we will give all the best energy to the people fighting and to the people fleeing out of Ukraine just now. That's most important of all to share with us here on a very positive day, because the discrimination of and the fight, we see people rising in Ukraine now. We simply have to be with them, because this is a matter to all of us. But when it comes to the COVID-19 and the effect it has had to the Nordic countries, I know that a lot of people, they said, oh, it has been awful, it has been really working against our vision, our free will to fleet or work between the Nordic countries. And of course it has affected the way people has been working or been moving among the Nordic countries, because the restriction made by the Nordic countries was made exactly to reach that goal, because it was restrictions to cope with the pandemic. And I think just where we are now in our very close dialogue, also to learn what is the need to learn now where we stand with the pandemic, not totally behind us, but hopefully most behind us, is that we have to share our results of the pandemic. And we have also taken initiatives among the ministers' group to see what was in it for us and what do we have to learn. And but what is most in my mind now is that the resilience in the Nordic countries is very high, and we are maybe the best regions recovering after the pandemic, and that's because we are so equal and we are sharing with each other, and we are also very flexible in all our settings, and I think that's the reason why we also cooperate very close, very coordinated, and we will do it even more coordinated in the time coming, because there were something that we should learn from this. But I do not know, I do not agree by person, and I'm not one of the persons who are most negative about what we have learned during the pandemic and where we stand. But when it comes to workforces and the effect there has been, I think, yes, as I said, and remarkable resilience, and also in the combination of the threats posed by a health crisis. Of course, we have to learn for that and out of that, because that will also come back to the Nordic countries. But I think we have done it good also because we have an infrastructure working very good together. And you also made it in your presentation, how the reason why so many people could work at home, and we could keep up companies in a high tempo, and we could also be able to keep up the very needed export, because that's so important for all the Nordic countries to our economy. So I think we have had the good opportunities, and that's also what we stand on now in the future. So, but the cooperation and our flexibility, talking to each other, all partners among, including the labor market and the youth, is really building up new understanding about the values and the need inside the Nordic countries. And that's the agenda we have to follow in the time coming.
Thank you, Flemming Møller Mortensen. And you mentioned the youth. Let's go to the youth, because young people were the ones hardest hit by unemployment during the pandemic, and they are still struggling. Kristine Ravnlund, how do you see the employment situation for young people today, and how do you see the future? What do we need to go from here?
Yeah. Well, I think just first of all, I think I feel really privileged being a Nordic citizen, especially in the time of COVID, because of this resilience. So I also recognize that we are at a lot better place than many other young people across the world. But when that is said, then I'm really nervous, and I know that COVID is to some extent behind us, but for the consequences for the young generation today, both in terms of work life, but also in terms of mental health. I think it was the Norwegian Minister of Health that was out saying it's a whole nother period of time in your life as a young people to leave these 2 years behind, just sitting back in front of a screen at home. So when looking into the work life, I'm worried because there are so many young people who haven't got the proper foot inside the labor market yet. And we saw that during COVID, especially young people took the consequences in terms of having to be reduced in work hours. And a lot of more young people are in what I would call atypical jobs. So this kind of platform work where they don't have the same stable conditions for when you are sick or when you cannot go to work because there are COVID, that you are secured a salary anyways. So I think there is a whole other instability for the conditions of young people that's also hit harder in COVID than for the rest of the generations. And one thing is people getting back to work now, but there is a long time consequence in terms of having a proper entrance to the work market for young people. And I think we have to wait to see how severe that actually is, both in terms of work life, but also in terms of the well-being in total.
So you are a little bit worried. Let's go to the employer side, and Petter Halkjær, you're a labor market manager. How do you see the future going from the pandemic? We saw a lot of people being able to work at home, but not everybody. I mean, over 60% still had to go to work, or they lost their work. So what do you see for the future?
First of all, thank you for inviting me here. It's a privilege to be here. Regard to the question, working from at home has risen to a very high level under the pandemic, and now it has settled on a lower level, but it is on a higher level than we have seen before the pandemic. So I see that the companies they have experienced that this is a way to keep and to attract employees, and also it's a flexible solution with regard to holding meetings, also between different countries. As an example, we have had discussions with Sweden, with Malmö, the municipality, with regard to how to make more Swedes come to Denmark to work. And this this planning has been made very easy because we have been able to do it online, the meetings. So I see that there are opportunities also. Working from at home can also make more people work cross border between the Nordic countries. But if I have more time. We also look ahead to an aging workforce, not only in Denmark but also in all the other Nordic countries. This is a challenge. It's a challenge also for the employers that we have a surplus of jobs and we have a lack of workers. These challenges could, to a part, be met by more mobility between the Nordic countries within the labor forces.
Let me interrupt you with a question there, because what we did see under the pandemic was that mobility, which was in existence, but it was disrupted by the lockdown, and it had some severe consequences. That doesn't really make people want to work in another country when they say, oh, I can be in the Schweiz if they lock down the border.
True. But this was also a very unnormal situation. Hopefully, we do not face more lockdowns again due to pandemics. And I think this would be the optimistic stand to say, let's look ahead. Let's try to enhance the possibilities to work between the countries. Which also includes that passport control between the borders is not a good idea. Making better tax law that provides that it's easier to work in different countries is also maybe something we can look into, and a lot of other areas.
Thank you. I'm going to let in our last panelist here. Magnus Gisle, you are the Secretary General for the trade union, or the Nordic Trade Union. How do you see it? I mean, we talk about resilience, and we talk about how well we actually did during the pandemic, but it also had some severe consequences for people traveling across the borders to work. And you actually also wrote a letter to the Nordic Council of Ministers about that.
Yes, that's right. Thanks a lot for inviting us and having the possibility to discuss with you. From the joint Nordic Trade Union perspective, I would like to start with one positive thing. And I think it's important to recognize that the Nordic model in this crisis has delivered. It works as we want it to work. It is resilient. It is constructed for handling restructuring and ongoing restructuring in this perspective. And the crisis put a lot at stake and challenged the system, but to some extent it works good. And it's good that the report, although briefly in the chapters I have taken part of so far, mentions the importance of the Nordic models and its system with try and bipart negotiations. Indeed, many of packages and furlough schemes that already in the beginning of the crisis, they were negotiated between governments and the social partners. And I think that's one of the strengths with the Nordic model. Concerning the question you raise, there was maybe not so good results from the decisions taken concerning lockdowns and how to stop the virus, even though I don't personally believe that it stops at a country border between two countries. I can start with quoting Bertel Haarder in his former capacity as president of Gränshinderrådet. 2020 was an annus horribilis for the Nordic integration. All the measures that were taken during the year to hamper mobility was contrary to the spirit of the 50s, with big decisions as agreement on common Nordic labour market and Nordic passport union. And the effects, as we all know, were very big for people working in the cross-border regions and commuting back and forth. And it's not acceptable that people don't have social security, that they don't have uninsurance systems that work between the countries. So we need to have that in place before we take these measures and take these decisions. We must really have it. It's basic, and as you said, we need it because people need to rely that my life, my work, my income will function, even though if we are in a crisis in the Nordic country. And this is particularly important in the perspective of being the most sustainable and integrated region in the world in a couple of years. then we can't do it in this way, no matter what crisis we have. It must work together, and then we need to integrate our systems. It's the only way to go forward, I think. I think that we need to rely on each other and our systems together. That's the basic thing to get the Nordic integration together.
Thank you. I can't help seeing the minister is really writing down notes here. So now I'm really curious as to, from what you heard here, there are different issues that needs to be tackled. And how do we do that? I mean, with the mobility, the need for the security for the mobility, the youth unemployment, is that something we could lift together? And then how?
We have to lift better together. But we also were it was a health crisis. And nations felt very responsible to their own citizens, first of all. But I think we have learned that when crisis will come in the future, immediately when you as a nation, as a parliament, as a government has taken the decision that they think is the best to the population of each country, they will immediately look to the Nordic cooperation. That's what I have learned. That's what I have built up. That's also what we can see just now when another crisis is coming to Europe, that we are communicating very, very close. Very late night hours, we call each other on ministers' level to discuss and find out which kind of consequences a new restriction or a new political decision will have to the Nordic neighbors. So I think that's the most important thing. And that's what Bertel Haarder forget. Yeah, totally forget. I have been in a discussion with him so many times. And he forget that it was a health crisis. And the nations has to protect their own citizens first. But of course we have learned about it. So we have been using so much time just saying to each other how close we are to each other in the Nordic countries. But now we have seen that when it comes to a crisis, making a new frame, we also have to frame a new dialogue. That's most important to me. So, because we have integrated systems, and we do rely on each other among the Nordic countries. So, but I also have to say, I live in the northern part of Denmark, in Jutland, northern Jutland. We also made restrictions. We made borders inside my region to protect people during the pandemic, exactly as we do when it comes to Nordic borders. So we do not only use it between countries, we also use it inside countries, and that's a learning, a lesson to take. But we did everything to save lives and to come out with the highest resilience after the crisis, and we succeeded. We succeeded in different ways. That's also a learning to pick up, and we also do that when we benchmark how we did it in different ways in the Nordic countries.
Thank you, Minister. I think Christina Ravnlund has a question or a comment.
No, just a comment, because I think I experienced the same on a youth level. Just this weekend I met with the chair of the Swedish Youth Council and met with the Ukrainian chair of their youth council, just to say we also experienced this cooperation. And I see that there is a lot of potential in terms of going forward on the integrating the Nordic youth, because I think it's important to keep this agenda going, and that we need to include future and new generations into this Nordic identity. And in the Danish Youth Council we have a lot of Nordic activities, and we cannot even accommodate all the people who want to join. So I just think there is a lot of opportunity, and there's also in another way today joint references, and you have a young generation who communicate across borders in a complete different way than maybe when you were young. Anyway, so just to say, I think there is a lot of potential, and I know we had a clear lack in terms of mobility, because I recognize there is a lot of opportunity in online communication, but I also see that this needs to be supported by a physical community of basically making friends across the borders to keep this bond going.
I don't know, should we just close it off with some short comments? I think if you focus on what you would like from the Nordic cooperation to make a better future, and we could start with the business part of it.
Well, as I said before, making it possible for more workers to cross borders between the Nordic countries is very important. This is integrating our economies through sharing experiences and also being able to move around with these scarce workers, the scarce working force, which is a challenge. That's a main target for the work ahead.
Okay, and
Can I make a question? Because you said it very good in the beginning that the mobility has been lower. We see a lower mobility now, people coming from Sweden to work in Denmark, than we had before the pandemic. I do not understand why it's so. Can you explain to me?
Make that short because we're running out of time. And I promise, sorry, Mr. But I promise to be tight on the time. So we actually, maybe you could answer him privately, and then he needs the answer. He needs the answer.
We'll do that.
Yes, and then I would give the final word to the trade union. What do you wish for the future?
I think we need, as I said before, we need to integrate our different systems more. We have to have more common rules, regulations, which covers the labor market in this perspective. And it has to be resilient in times of crisis. Next time we will have another crisis. We are in another type of crisis now, and we need to be resilient in that too. I think that is the most important thing, and for the long run, build trust and confidence for the citizens so they believe in our societies, in our Nordic cooperation, and in our European cooperation. That's the most important thing, I think.
Thank you. And then that was the end of our panel debate, and unfortunately the times just fly, so we don't really have time for questions from the audience. I have like 1,000 questions I would have liked to ask, but 45 minutes. So thank you to our panelists, and I would like to welcome the Director of the Nordic Council, Kristina Hafos. Do you have a microphone? Okay. So.
Yes. Thank you very much, and thank you for turning this around. It's a very special day today and a special year also. But first and foremost, thank you for a very interesting panel discussion. I would love to hear more, but hopefully we can continue the discussions in a moment. And also for the presentation. And also thank you for all of you participating here in the Nordens Hus today, and all of you participating digitally. Today is a very special day. The 23rd of March is Nordensdag, the Nordic Day. And today is also a more especially special Nordic Day, because on this day, 60 years ago, some of the Nordic countries in the start signed the Helsinki Treaty, which is a kind of a constitution for our Nordic cooperation. And this year is also 70 years since the Nordic Council, the interparliamentarian cooperation was established, as you can see behind me here. And now we heard some words from the youth also, and I just I think it's amazing that we have this Youth Nordic Council also, which last year had 50 years anniversary. It must be a world record in international youth cooperation, as well as the Council of Ministers also had 50 years anniversary. Just had to mention that. When we think about the Nordic Council and the Nordic cooperation as a whole, it is of course a result of the Nordic countries wanting to cooperate more and closer. But if we look back to the start, it was also a wish to create stability and peace, in addition of better societies for people, of course. In many ways, the establishment 70 years ago of the Nordic Council was a result of the Second World War. I guess we all hoped for that more and closer international cooperation, like the Nordic Council and also the EU, would ensure that we would never have a war in Europe again. That was the goal anyways. But unfortunately, we see that we have to do even more to strengthen international cooperation, to create stability, because we are in this terrible situation of war in Europe again. And now we are discussing the labor market seen from the corona pandemic, but there's no doubt that this war in Europe also will affect our labor market. So we'll probably see a new report on that in the coming times. We are fortunate, as many have mentioned before here, to live in the Nordic region. All the indexes on happiness and well-being, we are like on top and front runners. But we shouldn't take this for granted. There is a lot of work behind getting to this place, and we have to continue to develop further to ensure this will be the case in the future also. And we have to ensure that these fundamental building blocks of our society continue to function well, and the labor market is one of these fundamental building blocks, as well as, for example, our educational system, our welfare system, and also ensuring safe and interesting countries to live in. We haven't talked so much about culture and art, for example. That's also an important part of our societies. If we look at the result in this report, I know other reports also show that the Nordic countries are very lucky to come very well out of this corona pandemic, and we are very happy about that. But we can also see in this report that when we zoom in and look closer at our region, we have been hit different ways on different levels. I just want to like to thank also Nordic Region for this report. If we look at the Nordic countries, we see that the Faroe Islands, Denmark, Norway have done relatively well, while Iceland has been maybe labor market-wise hit harder. We also see that when you see the sectors, that for example, tourism sector, as we all know, also people working within culture, leisure, and transport have been heavily affected. And when we look at how people have been affected, unfortunately, we also see that young people have been very relatively hardly hit. Also people with low income and immigrants born outside the EU. Labor market mobility. We have talked a little bit about it today. Time is running, so I can't go into that, but we all know how that has been affected. I think it would be very interesting also to look at this. We have learned something also from this time, this working from home, opening our eyes to these new digital tools, which we have had for a very, very long time, but we just haven't been able to see it. I see a lot of opportunities lying in this. For example, here in the Nordic House, we have gone from all being in the house from Monday to Friday on to today. People can work from home 2 to 3 days a week. And I think it's a good thing. I think that will also have effect on people living in the rural areas, being able to be a more integrated part of the labor market in the Nordic, but I understand that discussion we will continue another time. So many things we could talk about, but I think it's important to mention that, without going into details with this mobility for the Nordic countries, that the Nordic Council and Nordic Council of Ministers are working constantly to get rid of these obstacles for people to study, to work, and to travel between Nordic countries through this Gränsehindringsgruppen or Gränsehindringsrådet, which are parliamentarians working to focus on this. And even though a lot of people who have been hit very hard, especially people living in cross-border areas, think we do too little, I think it's impressive to see exactly how Gränsehindringsrådet or Gränsehindringsgruppen constantly are trying to have a clear overview over all the obstacles and working together with governments and parliaments to make the necessary changes in laws to ensure that people can live as well as possible, work, study, and so on. And we must say that this COVID situation has made that list of obstacles unfortunately too long, but there is a very positive will both in the parliaments and the governments to work towards getting that list as small as possible. I think I will stop here. I could speak for a long time about this important topic, but thank you so much for putting this on the agenda, and thank you to all of you being here today on this Nordic Day, which is a very special Nordic Day because of our anniversary. I wish you a very good Nordic Day. Thank you.
And thank you, Christina. And now we are at the end of this event. I will just like to say thank you to everybody, and thank you to all you who have followed us online. And you could also follow other events through all the Nordic countries. There is one coming after us. So just tune in to that one. And from all of us here in Copenhagen, have a nice day. Nordic Day. Bite in over there, and something to drink as well. So please join us for a little mingle.